When Mira got the job offer abroad, we knew it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The salary alone was more than what the two of us were making combined, and the chance to work on something she was truly passionate about, designing eco-friendly urban spaces, was irresistible. I remember the night we decided. We sat on the balcony after the kids were asleep, the summer breeze warm against our skin, and she asked, "Can we do this? Can we handle the distance?" I took her hand and told her we could. "We'll figure it out," I said, even though I wasn't entirely sure what that meant. 2 weeks later, she was on a plane to Singapore, and I became the stay-at-home parent to Ella and Jake, 6 and 4, respectively. At first, it felt like a challenge I was ready for. The kids and I built routines. Mornings were a whirlwind of breakfast spills and fights over socks. Afternoons meant school for Ella and an endless stream of questions from Jake while I tried to fold laundry or cook dinner. Evenings were when we all sat down for video calls with Mira, her pixelated face smiling at us from a sterile-looking office or her tiny apartment kitchen. "How's my favorite crew?" she'd ask, and the kids would clamor over each other to tell her about their day. I'd wait my turn, my updates usually less interesting. Ella has a school recital next month. Jake finally slept through the night without a nightmare. The kids missed her, of course. Ella had started leaving little drawings on her desk, stick figures of our family with "Come back soon, Mom" scrawled across the top. Jake, too young to understand why she was gone, would often ask me when she was coming home. I told him the truth, not for a while. That answer always seemed to satisfy him, but for me, it left a hollow feeling in my chest. I didn't mind the grind. In fact, I liked it. There was something satisfying about being the one holding everything together. But there was also an ache. I missed her. I missed us. Video calls couldn't replace the way she used to rest her head on my shoulder while we watched TV, or the way we'd whisper about our day after the lights went out. I tried not to dwell on it. She was working hard, making sacrifices for all of us, and I couldn't let her down by being selfish. Months passed, and life settled into a rhythm. Ella started first grade, Jake grew taller, and I learned how to make pancakes without burning them. But something was missing. The house felt too quiet after the kids went to bed. My friends from work, the ones I used to grab drinks with, had all drifted away now that I wasn't in the office. I told myself this was temporary, that once Mira's contract ended, things would go back to normal. Still, there were nights when I sat alone on the couch, staring at the TV without really watching it, feeling like a shadow of myself. Then, one afternoon, I ran into Leah. I was at the park with the kids, trying to coax Jake down from a climbing frame while Ella sulked on a bench because she'd dropped her ice cream. Leah appeared out of nowhere, holding a spare napkin in her hand. "Here," she said, offering it to Ella. "It's not ice cream, but it's something." Ella took it reluctantly, and I finally looked up to see who this kind stranger was. My heart skipped a beat. It had been years, but there she was, Leah, my best friend from high school, looking just like she had in the old days, only grown up. "Leah?" I said, incredulous. She laughed. "Alex! Oh my God, it's been forever!" We caught up in bits and pieces that day. She was back in town after a divorce, working remotely and living with her parents while she figured out her next steps. She didn't have kids, but she loved them, she said, and it showed. Ella and Jake were instantly smitten. Before I knew it, she was joining us at the park regularly, then for lunch afterward, then for coffee at my place when the kids were napping. It was easy, natural, like no time had passed between us. I didn't think much of it at first. Having Leah around felt like having a piece of my old life back. A life where Mira and I were still figuring out our careers and our future. A life where I wasn't constantly tired and a little lonely. Leah made me laugh in a way I hadn't laughed in months. She listened when I vented about the chaos of parenting or my worries about Mira's work stress. She didn't judge me when I admitted I sometimes felt like I wasn't enough for my family. "You're doing great," she said once, touching my hand lightly. "Really, Alex, they're lucky to have you." I don't know why, but her words hit me hard that day. I nodded, blinking back tears, and she squeezed my hand before letting go. I told myself there was nothing wrong with it. We were just friends after all. But there were moments when I caught myself wondering what she thought of me. Not as a friend, but as a man. It was a dangerous line of thinking, and I knew it. I tried to push those thoughts away, but they always seemed to come back, especially on the nights when I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling. The turning point came on a rainy evening. The kids were asleep, and Leah had stayed late, helping me clean up after a particularly chaotic dinner. We ended up on the couch, talking about old times. She told me about her ex-husband, how he'd cheated on her, how it had broken her. "I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone like that again," she said, her voice soft. I told her about Mira, about how proud I was of her, but also how hard it was to be apart. The room felt heavy with something unspoken, and when I looked at Leah, she was watching me in a way that made my stomach twist. "I should go," she said suddenly, standing up. I nodded, but neither of us moved. Then she leaned down, her face inches from mine. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling, "if you ever—" She didn't finish. Instead, she pressed her lips to mine, and for a split second, I let her. My heart was pounding, my head screaming at me to stop, and I pulled away, muttering something incoherent. Leah looked stricken, like she hadn't meant to do it, like she was as confused as I was. "I'm sorry," she said, grabbing her coat. "I shouldn't have—" And then she was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The guilt was overwhelming. I hadn't done anything, not really, but I'd let it get too close. I'd let myself want something I shouldn't have, and it felt like a betrayal. The next day, I told Leah we couldn't see each other anymore. She didn't argue. "I get it," she said, her voice flat. "Take care of yourself, Alex." I felt a strange mix of relief and loss as I watched her walk away. For days, I avoided Mira's calls. When I finally answered, she could tell something was off. "What's wrong?" she asked, her face lined with worry. I tried to brush it off, but she wouldn't let it go. "Alex, please, talk to me." So I did. I told her everything. Meeting Leah, how close we'd gotten, the almost kiss. I expected her to be furious, to say she couldn't trust me, to hang up and leave me to stew in my shame. Instead, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Thank you for telling me." I was stunned. "You're not mad?" "I'm hurt," she said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "But I'm also glad you stopped it before it went further. And I'm glad you told me the truth. We'll get through this, Alex, but we need to work on us." That night, we talked for hours. We talked about how hard the distance had been, how much we missed each other, how we'd both been so focused on surviving that we'd forgotten to connect. She promised to find a way to visit more often, and I promised to be more open about my struggles. It wasn't easy, and it didn't fix everything overnight, but it was a start. Leah and I haven't spoken since, and I think that's for the best. Mira and I are still a work in progress, but we're stronger now, more honest with each other. I learned something important through all of this, that love isn't just about staying faithful. It's about choosing each other, every day, even when it's hard. And I choose her, every single day. Months passed after my confession to Mira, and although we'd agreed to work through it, the weight of my near mistake lingered in the air like a phantom. Mira started making more time for us, despite her hectic schedule. She'd call not just during the evenings, but sometimes during her lunch breaks or early mornings before the kids woke up. It helped to hear her voice more often, and I could tell she was trying. Still, I could sense the crack in her trust, faint but undeniable, even when she didn't say it outright. For my part, I did everything I could to rebuild what I'd almost broken. I dove headfirst into parenting and kept my days packed so that I wouldn't have a moment to dwell on Leah or the ache of Mira's absence. There was a new rhythm to life now. Gymnastics lessons for Ella, story time with Jake at the library, and weekend trips to the beach or the museum to keep them occupied. I was determined to prove, to Mira and myself, that I could handle this, that I could be better. But life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I got a text from Leah. I stared at my phone, the words blurring together in the glow of the screen. It was brief. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Hope you're doing okay?" I didn't respond. I told myself it wasn't worth opening that door again, not even a crack. But my chest tightened, a mix of guilt and something else I didn't want to name. I deleted the message and left my phone on the kitchen counter, as if distance from it would create distance from her. The next morning, Mira called. It was earlier than usual, and her voice sounded tired but cheerful. She was planning a trip home. 2 weeks, she said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. "I've managed to get time off for the first time in forever. I can't wait to see you all, and you especially." There was a pause, her tone softening. "I miss you, Alex." "I miss you too," I said, meaning every word. The kids were thrilled when I told them. Ella immediately started drawing a welcome home banner, complete with glitter that ended up everywhere, while Jake declared he was going to make Mom her favorite pancakes. For the first time in months, the house buzzed with anticipation. I threw myself into preparations, cleaning every corner of the house, fixing the squeaky door Mira had always complained about, even planting flowers in the garden that she loved. It was going to be perfect. But the universe doesn't care about perfect. 2 days before Mira's flight, Jake came down with a fever. At first, I thought it was just a cold. Kids get sick all the time. But by the next morning, he was listless, his skin hot to the touch, and he kept crying that his stomach hurt. I rushed him to the doctor, Ella clutching my hand tightly as I carried Jake into the clinic. "Appendicitis," the doctor said after an exam. "We need to operate right away." Everything became a blur after that. I called Mira from the hospital, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. She wanted to fly back immediately, but the logistics made it impossible to get an earlier flight. "Just keep me updated," she said, her voice thick with worry. "Kiss him for me, okay? Tell him I love him." The surgery went well, and Jake was groggy but stable by the time they wheeled him into recovery. I sat by his bed all night, Ella curled up in a chair beside me, clutching her stuffed animal. It was one of the longest nights of my life. The next morning, Mira called again. I updated her on Jake's condition, and then she asked, "How are you holding up?" I hesitated. "Tired," I admitted. "But we're okay. I wish you were here." "So do I," she said softly. "I feel so far away. But you're doing amazing, Alex. You're stronger than you think." When Mira finally arrived 2 days later, Jake was already starting to bounce back, his little face lighting up when he saw her. She rushed to his side, hugging him gently and covering his face with kisses. Then she turned to me, pulling me into a tight embrace that lingered longer than I expected. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Over the next 2 weeks, having Mira home felt like a balm. The kids were over the moon, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were a team again. We stayed up late every night after the kids were asleep, talking about everything and nothing. Her work, my days with the kids, the future. On one of those nights, she looked at me and said, "I don't want us to drift again, Alex. We need to keep choosing each other, even when it's hard." "I know," I said, "and I will, every day." After she left, things were different, in a good way. We were both making more effort to bridge the distance, and it felt like the foundation of our marriage was finally solid again. But life isn't a movie, and happy endings don't come tied up neatly in a bow. A few months later, Leah showed up at Ella's school recital. I spotted her as soon as I walked into the auditorium, sitting near the back. My heart sank. Ella had invited her. She'd mentioned it casually days earlier, but I hadn't thought much of it. "Miss Leah said she loves music," Ella had said. "Can I tell her to come?" Leah caught my eye and waved awkwardly. I gave her a tight nod, unsure of what to do. After the recital, she came over to say hello, and I braced myself. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said quickly. "Ella invited me, and I didn't want to disappoint her." "It's fine," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Ella was tugging at her hand, asking her to come see her trophy, and Leah hesitated, looking at me for permission. I nodded reluctantly. After a few minutes, I pulled Leah aside. "This has to be the last time," I said quietly. "I'm sorry, Leah, but Mira and I are working on things, and I can't—" "I get it," she said, cutting me off. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sad. "I just wanted to see Ella's recital, that's all. I won't bother you again." True to her word, she didn't. That was the last time I saw her, and it felt like closing the door on a chapter of my life I wasn't proud of. Mira and I are still navigating the complexities of long-distance marriage and parenthood, but we're stronger than we were. There are still hard days, days when the loneliness creeps in, or when the kids act out because they miss their mom. But there are good days too, days when we laugh together on a video call, or when Ella and Jake do something that makes us both feel like we're doing okay as parents. I've learned that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It's about showing up, even when it's messy, even when you've made mistakes. It's about choosing each other, over and over again. And every day, I choose Mira.